Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something that might just change how you think about love, religion, and ancient party planning forever. Picture this. You're standing in the warm Mediterranean dawn, watching thousands of people stream toward a gleaming marble temple dedicated to Aphrodite, goddess of love. The air thrums with anticipation, heavy with the scent of burning incense and blooming roses. But here's the thing that'll probably blow your mind. These weren't just religious ceremonies. They were elaborate matchmaking events, economic powerhouses, and social revolutions all rolled into one intoxicating festival experience. You probably won't survive learning what actually went down at these gatherings without questioning everything you thought you knew about ancient romance. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and what time you're listening. I love seeing where this journey takes us around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself transported to ancient Paphos, Cyprus, around 300 BCE. The sun hasn't fully risen, but the city pulses with energy. Temple bells ring across the harbor, their bronze voices calling faithful and curious alike to witness something extraordinary. This isn't just any morning. It's the beginning of the Aphrodite, the most important festival honoring the goddess of love, beauty, and desire. As you walk through the narrow streets, your sandals clicking against worn stone, you notice how different this feels from other religious festivals you might have attended. There's an electricity in the air, a sense of possibility that makes your heart beat faster. Merchants are already setting up stalls selling everything from perfumed oils to small bronze mirrors, their voices creating a melodic cacophony as they hawk their wares to early arrivals. The temple complex looms ahead, its white marble columns catching the first rays of sunlight like captured moonbeams. But what strikes you most isn't the architecture, it's the people. Unlike the solemn, segregated religious gatherings you might expect, this crowd represents every level of society mixing together in unprecedented ways. Wealthy matrons in silk chitons chat animatedly with working-class women, while young men from prominent families eye potential brides from across social boundaries that normally seem insurmountable. You pause at a fountain where pilgrims are washing their hands and faces, preparing for the sacred rituals ahead. The water sparkles with rose petals, a detail that seems almost too perfect, but historians confirm that Aphrodite's festivals were renowned for their sensory extravagance. The goddess demanded beauty in all things, and her followers delivered with an attention to aesthetic detail that would make modern event planners weep with envy. A group of temple priestesses glides past, their movements synchronized like dancers. They wear crowns of myrtle leaves and carry baskets filled with what looks like bread, wine, and small clay figurines. These aren't just religious officials. They're the orchestrators of what amounts to the ancient world's most sophisticated social networking event. Through careful observation and strategic conversations, they'll spend the next 3 days facilitating connections that could reshape entire family lineages. The morning air carries sounds that seem almost modern in their familiarity. Laughter, negotiation, the clink of coins changing hands. But there's something else too, an undercurrent of genuine spiritual devotion that reminds you this isn't just an elaborate singles mixer. People genuinely believe Aphrodite can intervene in their romantic lives, and that belief transforms every interaction with sacred significance. As you approach the temple steps, you notice carved inscriptions covering nearly every available surface. These aren't just decorative elements. They're personal messages to the goddess, desperate pleas for love, gratitude for romantic success, and promises of future offerings. Some are elegantly carved by professional stoneworkers, others crudely scratched by lovesick teenagers. Historians still argue whether these inscriptions represent genuine religious devotion or sophisticated ancient graffiti, but their emotional intensity remains undeniable. The festival officially begins when the head priestess appears at the temple's highest balcony, raising a golden dove toward the rising sun. The crowd falls silent, then erupts in cheers that echo across the harbor. Ships in the distance blow their horns in response. Even sailors know better than to ignore Aphrodite's celebration. You're about to witness 3 days that will challenge everything you thought you knew about ancient religion, romance, and social mobility. The boundaries between sacred and secular, public and private, will blur in ways that feel surprisingly modern. Love, it turns out, has always been complicated. The morning sun climbs higher as you follow the crowd deeper into the temple complex. But what you're about to witness will challenge every assumption you've ever held about ancient religious practices. The air grows thick with frankincense, and something else, an undercurrent of anticipation that makes your skin prickle with awareness. You notice a separate entrance to the temple's eastern wing, guarded by priestesses whose elaborate jewelry and confident bearing set them apart from the other religious officials. These women move with a grace that seems almost choreographed, their silk garments catching the light as they guide select visitors through ornate doorways. This is where the most controversial aspect of Aphrodite worship unfolds, the practice that scholars euphemistically call sacred prostitution. But here's where modern misconceptions crash, headfirst into ancient reality. What you're witnessing isn't the crude exploitation that sensationalized documentaries might suggest. Instead, you're observing a complex religious and economic institution that gave certain women unprecedented power in a male-dominated society. These temple courtesans, called hierodules, weren't victims but skilled professionals who commanded respect, accumulated wealth, and wielded influence that extended far beyond the temple walls. A young woman emerges from the eastern wing, and you can't help but notice how other festival-goers treat her. Men bow respectfully, women seek her advice about beauty treatments, and even wealthy merchants defer to her opinions about trade matters. She's not just a religious figure. She's a cultural influencer whose endorsement can make or break social reputations. The irony would be hilarious if it weren't so profound. In a world where most women couldn't own property or speak in public forums, these sacred courtesans operated their own businesses and advised politicians. The economic reality hits you as you observe the discrete transactions taking place. A Roman senator's son hands a priestess a small leather pouch, not payment for services, but a temple donation that happens to coincide with a private consultation about matters of the heart. The distinction matters enormously in ancient legal and social terms, transforming what might seem like simple commerce into complex religious theater. You overhear a conversation between 2 middle-aged women discussing their daughters' futures. One mentions that her girl has been accepted for temple service, and the other responds with congratulations that sound genuinely enthusiastic. This isn't a family tragedy. It's a career opportunity that could elevate their daughter's social status beyond anything traditional marriage might offer. Historians still argue whether these arrangements represented genuine religious calling or economic necessity, but the women involved clearly understood the strategic advantages. The temple's interior reveals more surprises. Elaborate frescoes depict scenes of divine lovemaking between gods and mortals, but they're rendered with artistic sophistication that transforms potentially crude imagery into something genuinely beautiful. The message seems clear. Physical love, when properly consecrated, becomes a pathway to divine understanding. It's a theological concept that would scandalize early Christians, but makes perfect sense within Aphrodite's worship system. A group of young men waits nervously in an antechamber, clearly first-time visitors unsure of proper protocol. An older priestess approaches them with maternal kindness, explaining the rituals they're about to experience. Her words emphasize spiritual preparation and emotional readiness, rather than physical mechanics. These aren't casual encounters, but carefully orchestrated religious experiences designed to honor the goddess while providing practical education about love and intimacy. The afternoon brings a different energy as married couples arrive seeking Aphrodite's blessing for fertility or relationship harmony. You watch as priestesses perform elaborate ceremonies involving rose water, honey, and small golden amulets. These rituals blur the line between religious service and ancient marriage counseling, with temple officials offering advice that sounds remarkably similar to modern relationship therapy. What strikes you most profoundly is how the entire system operates on consent and mutual benefit. The hierodules choose their own schedules, set their own boundaries, and retain control over their earnings. Visitors understand they're participating in sacred rituals rather than commercial transactions. The goddess herself is believed to be present in every interaction, transforming physical intimacy into spiritual communion. As evening approaches, you notice how the temple's atmosphere shifts. The daytime crowds thin out, replaced by more discreet visitors seeking private consultations. Oil lamps cast dancing shadows on marble walls, creating an ambience that feels both mysterious and welcoming. The sacred and profane interweave so seamlessly that distinguishing between them becomes impossible. A final observation leaves you speechless. Several hierodules are clearly pregnant, their conditions celebrated rather than hidden. Children born from temple unions are considered especially blessed by Aphrodite, often raised within the religious community and destined for positions of honor. The goddess of love, it seems, extends her protection to every aspect of human reproduction and family formation. The complexity of what you've witnessed defies easy categorization. This isn't exploitation or liberation in simple terms. It's something uniquely ancient, a religious and social system that operated by rules we can barely comprehend. Dawn breaks over Athens, and you find yourself swept into a completely different kind of Aphrodite celebration, one that transforms the city's rooftops into gardens of grief and unexpected romance. The Adonia festival is beginning, and what you're about to witness will show you how ancient women turned mourning into matchmaking with breathtaking creativity. You climb narrow stairs to a typical Athenian rooftop, joining a group of women who have been preparing for this moment all year. Their arms are loaded with small clay pots, bags of seeds, and an assortment of gardening tools that look surprisingly modern. But this isn't ordinary agriculture. It's ritualized theater that honors Adonis, Aphrodite's beloved mortal lover who died tragically young, and somehow manages to spark more romantic connections than a modern dating app. The story behind this festival reads like ancient soap opera gold. Adonis, the most beautiful mortal man ever born, captured Aphrodite's heart so completely that she neglected her divine duties to spend time with him. When a jealous boar killed him during a hunting expedition, her grief shook the heavens. But here's the twist that makes this festival so fascinating. Instead of simply mourning, Greek women decided to recreate his brief, intense life through gardening metaphors that became elaborate social events. You watch as women carefully plant lettuce, fennel, and barley seeds in their small pots, watering them with a mixture that includes wine, honey, and their own tears. both real and theatrical. The seeds will sprout quickly in the Mediterranean heat, grow lush and green for about 8 days, then wither and die just as suddenly. It's a perfect metaphor for young love, and everyone knows it. The knowing glances and barely suppressed giggles tell you that deeper games are being played here. A young woman named Lysandra catches your attention as she tends her miniature garden with exaggerated care. She's recently widowed, and this is her first Adonia as a single woman. The other participants treat her with special attention, offering advice about seed placement that sounds suspiciously like coded discussions about eligible bachelors. When she mentions that her lettuce seems particularly vigorous this year, the group erupts in laughter that has nothing to do with agriculture. The rooftop fills with the sound of women's voices sharing stories, gossip, and not-so-subtle romantic intelligence. You realize this festival serves as an elaborate information network where marriage prospects are evaluated, family reputations are assessed, and strategic alliances are formed. The gardening provides perfect cover for conversations that would be impossible in mixed company or formal settings. As the morning progresses, you notice how the festival's structure encourages both competition and cooperation. Women compare their garden's progress, but they also share resources and offer mutual support. A mother with 3 unmarried daughters receives extra seeds from her neighbors, while a successful matchmaker from previous years dispenses advice about optimal watering techniques that everyone understands refers to courtship strategies. The afternoon brings male visitors, brothers, fathers, and potential suitors who arrive bearing gifts of wine and honey cakes. They're officially here to honor Adonis, but their real purpose becomes obvious as they engage in carefully choreographed conversations with the gardening women. You watch a young man named Alexios present a particularly fine amphora of wine to Lysandra, complimenting her garden's beauty in terms that clearly reference her own attractiveness. Historians still argue whether the Adonia was primarily a religious festival or a sophisticated social institution, but the evidence suggests it functioned as both simultaneously. The religious elements provided legitimacy and structure, while the social aspects served practical community needs. Women gained rare opportunities for public expression and social networking, while families could arrange marriages within a framework that honored divine will. The festival's emotional climax arrives as the sun sets. The women begin their ritual lament for Adonis, their voices rising in harmonized grief that echoes across the city. But even this mourning contains elements of performance and social signaling. The most beautiful voices attract attention, the most convincing tears demonstrate emotional depth, and the most creative garden arrangements showcase artistic talent. Everything becomes a form of advertisement for marriageability. You notice how the festival creates temporary inversions of normal social hierarchies. Slave women participate alongside their mistresses, courtesans mingle with respectable wives, and young girls observe the rituals that will prepare them for their own romantic futures. For 8 days, the rooftops become spaces where different rules apply and new possibilities emerge. As night falls, oil lamps illuminate the miniature gardens, creating a magical atmosphere that transforms practical matchmaking into something genuinely enchanting. The combination of religious devotion, community bonding, and romantic opportunity produces an event that serves multiple social functions while maintaining its sacred character. The festival's genius lies in its perfect balance of structure and spontaneity. The religious framework provides safety and legitimacy, while the gardening metaphor allows for creative expression and subtle communication. Women can demonstrate their domestic skills, emotional depth, and social connections, while participating in activities that honor the goddess and serve their community's practical needs. Tomorrow, the gardens will continue growing, the conversations will deepen, and the romantic possibilities will multiply. The Adonia proves that ancient people understood something modern dating culture often misses. The most successful romantic connections grow from shared activities, community support. The marketplace surrounding Aphrodite's temple buzzes with an energy that would make modern wedding planners weep with envy. You weave through stalls that offer everything from love potions, guaranteed to work within 3 moon cycles, to marriage contracts written on papyrus, so fine it feels like silk between your fingers. This isn't just commerce, it's the beating heart of ancient romance, where divine favor meets practical necessity in the most delightfully chaotic way imaginable. Your first stop is a perfume vendor whose stall smells like heaven decided to open a boutique. The elderly woman behind the counter, her fingers stained purple from crushing rose petals, claims her grandmother learned the secret formulas directly from Aphrodite's priestesses. She offers you a small clay vial filled with liquid that shimmers like captured starlight. 1 drop behind each ear, she whispers conspiratorially, and even the gods will notice you. The price she quotes would feed a family for a week, but the young man next to you hands over the coins without hesitation. Love, apparently, has always been expensive. A few stalls down, you discover something that makes you do a double take. A marriage broker operating out of what looks like a combination legal office and fortune-telling booth. Scrolls cover every surface, each one detailing the family histories, dowry expectations, and personal preferences of available singles throughout the Mediterranean. The broker, a sharp-eyed woman named Theodora, explains her services with the confidence of someone who's successfully matched over 300 couples. She doesn't just arrange marriages. She conducts background checks, negotiates contracts, and even offers relationship counseling for couples experiencing difficulties. The honey cake vendor catches your attention next, not because of his pastries, though they smell incredible, but because of the elaborate ritual surrounding their purchase. Customers don't just buy cakes, they commission them with specific symbolic decorations. Hearts for new love, doves for fidelity, roses for passion, and pomegranates for fertility. You watch a nervous young man describe his beloved's preferences in excruciating detail, ensuring his gift will convey exactly the right romantic message. The baker nods seriously, treating each order like a diplomatic mission. What strikes you most about this marketplace is how it democratizes romance. A slave saving copper coins for a simple bronze mirror receives the same respectful service as a wealthy merchant commissioning an elaborate silver jewelry set. Love, the vendors seem to understand, affects everyone equally, regardless of social status. The goddess doesn't discriminate, and neither do her earthly representatives. A commotion near the temple steps draws your attention to the most fascinating stall of all, a letter writer who specializes in romantic correspondence. Her services range from simple love notes to elaborate poetic declarations that would make modern greeting card companies obsolete. You watch her interview a tongue-tied farmer who wants to propose to his neighbor's daughter but can't find the words. Within minutes, she's crafting a declaration that combines agricultural metaphors with divine imagery, creating something both personal and profound. The farmer's face lights up as she reads it back to him. He's never heard his feelings expressed so beautifully. The afternoon brings a different crowd as married couples arrive seeking remedies for relationship troubles. An apothecary specializes in herbs that supposedly restore passion to long-term partnerships, while a counselor offers discreet consultations about marital harmony. You overhear a middle-aged woman explaining that her husband has become distant since their youngest child left home. The counselor nods knowingly, prescribing a combination of specific rituals, dietary changes, and communication strategies that sound remarkably similar to modern marriage therapy. The jewelry section of the marketplace reveals the ancient world's sophisticated understanding of romantic symbolism. Rings aren't just decorative, they're complex communication devices. A silver band with intertwined dolphins means faithful love, while gold earrings shaped like roses indicate passionate desire. A young woman examines a necklace featuring tiny bronze keys, which the vendor explains symbolizes access to the heart. The prices vary wildly, but the emotional investment remains constant across all social classes. You notice how the marketplace serves as an informal education center for romantic relationships. Older women share advice with younger ones. Experienced matchmakers mentor newcomers, and even the vendors contribute wisdom gained from years of observing human nature. A teenage girl receives a gentle lecture about the importance of patience in love, while a recently divorced man learns about the rituals necessary for attracting a second wife. The festival's economic impact becomes obvious as you observe the constant flow of money changing hands. Temple donations, vendor purchases, and service fees create a complex economy that supports hundreds of families. The goddess of love, it turns out, is also the goddess of prosperity for those wise enough to serve her followers' needs. As evening approaches, the marketplace transforms into something even more magical. Oil lamps cast dancing shadows between the stalls, creating intimate spaces where private negotiations can occur. The daytime's cheerful chaos gives way to more serious business. Final marriage arrangements, last-minute gift purchases, and discreet consultations about sensitive romantic matters. The marketplace proves that ancient people understood something modern culture often forgets. Love requires community support, practical resources, and divine blessing to flourish. These vendors aren't just selling products, they're providing the infrastructure that makes successful relationships possible. The temple's eastern wing reveals secrets that would make modern career counselors rethink everything they know about professional advancement. You follow a group of well-dressed women through corridors lined with frescoes depicting Aphrodite's various forms. But these aren't ordinary worshippers. They're former hierodules who have transformed their temple service into unprecedented social mobility. And their success stories will challenge every assumption you've ever held about ancient women's opportunities. You're introduced to Aspasia, a woman whose journey from temple courtesan to influential political advisor reads like an ancient version of a rags-to-riches biography. She arrived at the temple 15 years ago as a war orphan with nothing but her intelligence and beauty. Now she owns 3 houses in Athens, advises prominent politicians, and commands respect from men who would normally never acknowledge a woman's opinion. Her secret: she understood that temple service provided more than religious experience. It offered education, networking opportunities, and financial independence that traditional marriage could never match. The morning's first revelation comes as you observe Aspasia conducting what amounts to a business meeting with 2 Roman senators. They're seeking her advice about a trade dispute, and she responds with insights that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of economics, law, and international relations. This isn't unusual. Many hierodules received extensive education as part of their temple training, learning languages, mathematics, rhetoric, and philosophy alongside their religious duties. The goddess of love, it turns out, demanded intellectual as well as physical beauty from her servants. A younger woman named Courtesan shares her story as you walk through the temple's library. Yes, library, because these women were expected to be conversationalists as well as companions. She explains how her 5 years of temple service allowed her to save enough money to purchase her own freedom. She'd been sold into slavery as a child, buy a small house, and establish a successful perfume business. The temple provided not just income, but also the social connections necessary for commercial success. Her clients include some of the wealthiest women in the city, all of whom she met during her religious service. The afternoon brings a fascinating glimpse into the temple's internal hierarchy. Senior hierodules like Aspasia mentor newcomers, teaching them everything from proper conversation techniques to financial management. You observe a training session where experienced women demonstrate how to navigate complex social situations, handle difficult clients, and maintain their dignity while serving the goddess. It's like watching an ancient finishing school combined with a business academy. What strikes you most profoundly is how these women view their service. They don't see themselves as victims or even as rebels against social norms. They see themselves as blessed by Aphrodite with opportunities unavailable to other women. A conversation with Lydia, who's been at the temple for 12 years, reveals this perspective clearly. She explains that while her sister married young and now struggles to feed 4 children on her husband's modest income, she's accumulated enough wealth to support her entire extended family while maintaining her independence. The temple's financial records, kept with meticulous care by the hierodules themselves, reveal the scope of their economic success. These women don't just earn money, they invest it wisely, purchasing property, funding trading expeditions, and even making loans to prominent citizens. Several have become wealthy enough to sponsor public works projects, gaining the kind of civic recognition usually reserved for male aristocrats. You witness a particularly interesting negotiation as Aspasia discusses a potential marriage proposal. A wealthy merchant wants to marry her, offering a substantial dowry and promising to respect her business interests. She considers the offer carefully, weighing the social respectability of marriage against the freedom of her current status. Historians still argue whether such marriages represented genuine love matches or strategic alliances. But the women involved clearly understood they had choices unavailable to their conventional counterparts. The temple's evening activities reveal another dimension of these women's influence. They host salons where philosophers, poets, and politicians gather to discuss ideas and form alliances. These gatherings serve multiple purposes. They provide intellectual stimulation for the hierodules, create networking opportunities for their guests, and generate additional income through discrete fees for attendance. The goddess of love, it seems, also presides over the exchange of ideas. A conversation with an elderly former hierodule named Sappho, not the famous poet, but named in her honor, provides historical perspective. She served the temple for 20 years before retiring to manage her own household, and she's watched 3 generations of women transform their lives through temple service. Her observations about changing social attitudes reveal how these women gradually gained acceptance and respect from the broader community. The most surprising discovery comes as you learn about the temple's retirement system. Long-serving hierodules receive pensions, housing assistance, and continued medical care. Some establish their own businesses with temple support, while others become priestesses or administrators. The goddess provides for her servants throughout their lives, creating a social safety net that surpasses anything available to conventional women. As night falls, you realize you've witnessed something remarkable, a religious institution that functioned as an ancient form of women's liberation, providing education. The Roman Forum buzzes with an energy that transcends mere politics, as you witness how Aphrodite's festivals became the ultimate networking events for ambitious politicians. What you're about to observe will show you how rose petals and marriage contracts shape the destiny of empires, proving that love and power have always been intimate bedfellows in ways that would make modern political strategists take notes. You find yourself standing beside Marcus Aurelius Cornelius, a senator whose family has been climbing the political ladder for 3 generations through carefully orchestrated romantic alliances. Today's Aphrodite celebration isn't just about honoring the goddess. It's about securing his daughter's engagement to the son of a powerful military commander, a union that will strengthen his faction's influence in the upcoming consular elections. The irony isn't lost on you. The goddess of love presides over marriages that have everything to do with strategy and very little to do with actual affection. The morning ceremonies begin with elaborate processions where political families display their wealth, connections, and marriageable children like peacocks showing their plumes. You watch as teenage daughters parade in silk gowns, worth more than most citizens' annual income, while their mothers engage in subtle negotiations disguised as casual conversation. A compliment about a girl's beauty might actually be an opening bid for dowry discussions, while praise for a young man's rhetoric skills could signal interest in a political alliance. The temple steps become an informal marriage market where families size each other up with the precision of military strategists. You overhear Livia Drusilla discussing her son's prospects with 3 different matrons, each conversation carefully calibrated to extract maximum information while revealing minimum commitment. She mentions his recent military service in Gaul, his friendship with the governor's nephew, and his inheritance expectations, all coded signals about his political potential and financial resources. What fascinates you most is how these negotiations blend genuine religious devotion with ruthless pragmatism. The families truly believe Aphrodite influences romantic destiny, so they seek her blessing for unions that serve their earthly ambitions. A successful political marriage isn't just good strategy. It's evidence of divine favor that enhances the family's reputation and future prospects. The afternoon brings more direct political maneuvering as established alliances are celebrated and new ones are proposed. You witness the betrothal ceremony between young Gaius and Helena, whose families control different aspects of the grain trade. Their union will create a monopoly that could influence food prices throughout the empire, but the ceremony emphasizes their mutual devotion and the goddess's blessing on their love. The political implications remain carefully hidden beneath layers of romantic rhetoric and religious symbolism. A particularly shrewd negotiation unfolds as you observe Senator Quintus arranging his nephew's marriage to secure votes for an upcoming law about provincial taxation. The bride's father controls a block of senators from Hispania, and their support could determine the legislation's fate. The marriage contract includes specific clauses about political cooperation, but these are framed as expressions of family loyalty rather than explicit vote buying. Aphrodite, it seems, provides perfect cover for activities that might otherwise appear corrupt. The festival's evening banquet reveals how these romantic alliances create complex webs of mutual obligation and shared interest. You sit near a table where 3 families who have intermarried over 2 generations coordinate their positions on various political issues. Their children's marriages have created bonds that transcend individual ambitions, forming a political dynasty that could influence Roman policy for decades. The goddess of love has become the patron saint of political consolidation. The most surprising aspect of these arrangements is how often they actually produce genuine affection between the spouses. You meet Claudia and Marcus, whose marriage was arranged 5 years ago to unite two rival factions, but who have developed real love for each other. Their political alliance has evolved into personal partnership, and they credit Aphrodite with blessing their union with both success and happiness. The goddess, it appears, can transform calculated arrangements into authentic relationships. A conversation with an elderly political matron named Fulvia provides historical perspective on how these practices evolved. She explains that her grandmother's generation relied on crude force and bribery to achieve political goals, but modern families understand that marriage alliances create more stable and lasting power structures. The goddess of love has taught Romans that cooperation produces better results than conflict, even in the ruthless world of imperial politics. The festival's religious ceremonies provide legitimacy for activities that might otherwise seem purely mercenary. When families gather to offer sacrifices for their children's future happiness, they're also publicly announcing their political alliances and seeking divine sanction for their earthly ambitions. The priests understand this dual purpose and craft rituals that honor both romantic love and political necessity. You observe how these marriage negotiations require sophisticated diplomatic skills. Families must balance multiple competing interests while maintaining the appearance of religious devotion and parental concern. A single misstep could destroy years of careful relationship building, while success could elevate a family's status for generations. The stakes are enormous, but the goddess provides a framework that makes even the most complex negotiations manageable. The festival's final ceremony demonstrates how personal and political interests can align perfectly. As the newly engaged couples receive Aphrodite's blessing, their families celebrate unions that will strengthen their positions while potentially creating genuine happiness for their children. The goddess of love presides over arrangements that serve both heart and ambition, proving that romance and politics need not be mutually exclusive. As you reflect on the day's events, you realize you've witnessed something remarkable: a religious festival that functions as a sophisticated political institution, where the goddess of love facilitates the formation of alliances that will shape the empire's future. These aren't just marriages, they're diplomatic treaties blessed by divine authority and celebrated with genuine joy. The pre-dawn air fills with the soft cooing of hundreds of doves as you enter the temple's sacred aviary. But what you're about to witness will reveal the complex moral mathematics behind ancient animal sacrifice. The goddess of love demands blood offerings, and the contradiction between her gentle nature and these violent rituals creates tensions that still puzzle historians today. You watch as temple attendants carefully select birds for the morning ceremonies, their practiced hands evaluating each dove's perfection with the precision of modern quality control inspectors. These aren't random choices. Aphrodite supposedly prefers birds that are completely white, unblemished, and ideally born during the spring months when love energy peaks. The irony strikes you immediately. Creatures symbolizing peace and devotion are about to die in honor of the goddess who created them. A young priestess named Melania explains the ritual's theological justification as she prepares the sacred knives. The doves aren't really dying, she insists. They're being transformed into messengers who carry worshippers' prayers directly to Aphrodite's heavenly realm. Their blood becomes a communication medium that transcends the barrier between mortal and divine worlds. It's a beautiful explanation that doesn't quite mask the uncomfortable reality of what's about to happen. The first sacrifice begins as the sun crests the horizon, and you're struck by the ceremony's unexpected gentleness. The priestess holds each dove tenderly, whispering what sounds like an apology before making the quick cut that ends its life. The blood is caught in golden bowls and mixed with wine, rose water, and honey to create a libation that will be poured over the goddess's statue. The dove's body is burned on a marble altar, its smoke carrying prayers skyward along with the bird's released spirit. What disturbs you most isn't the killing itself. Witnessed enough ancient religious practices to understand their cultural context, but the economic machinery surrounding these sacrifices. A thriving industry has developed around breeding, selling, and preparing sacrificial animals. You meet Demetrius, a dove breeder whose family has supplied the temple for 4 generations, and his casual discussion of profit margins and seasonal pricing makes the sacred seem suddenly commercial. The afternoon brings a different perspective as you observe families who have saved for months to afford a proper sacrifice. A farmer's wife clutches 3 silver coins, her entire savings, as she purchases a single dove to ensure her daughter's upcoming marriage receives divine blessing. The priestess accepts her offering with genuine reverence, understanding that this represents enormous sacrifice from someone who can barely afford basic necessities. The goddess, it seems, values devotion more than wealth. A heated theological debate erupts between 2 groups of worshippers about the necessity of animal sacrifice. The traditionalists argue that blood offerings have always been central to Aphrodite's worship, while reformers suggest that flowers, perfumes, and prayers should suffice. You listen as an elderly priest explains that the goddess herself instituted these practices, while a younger colleague counters that divine will can evolve as human understanding deepens. Historians still argue whether these reforms represented genuine religious development or economic pressure from those who couldn't afford expensive sacrifices. The temple's record-keeping reveals the staggering scale of these offerings. On major festival days, hundreds of doves die in honor of the goddess, along with smaller numbers of lambs, goats, and even occasional bulls for the wealthiest donors. The economic impact extends far beyond the temple walls, supporting breeders, transporters, and specialized craftsmen who create the elaborate altars and ceremonial tools required for proper sacrifices. You witness a particularly poignant moment as a young soldier prepares to sacrifice a dove before departing for military service. He's seeking Aphrodite's protection for the wife he's leaving behind, and his hands shake as he performs the ritual. The priestess guides him through each step with maternal patience, understanding that this ceremony provides psychological comfort as much as divine intervention. The dove's death becomes a tangible expression of his love and fear, transforming abstract emotions into concrete religious action. The festival's evening ceremonies reveal how sacrifice rituals create community bonds among participants. Families who have offered doves together feel connected by shared religious experience, while the priests who perform these ceremonies develop reputations based on their skill and spiritual sensitivity. A particularly gifted sacrificial priest named Aphrodite has gained fame throughout the Mediterranean for his ability to interpret the patterns of blood and smoke, providing guidance that many consider divinely inspired. The most troubling aspect of these practices becomes apparent as you observe the temple's disposal methods for sacrificial remains. While the choice portions are burned as offerings, Significant amounts of meat are distributed to temple staff and sold in nearby markets. The goddess of love has inadvertently created a religious butcher shop that provides protein for the local community while generating additional revenue for the temple. The sacred and commercial interweave so completely that separating them becomes impossible. A conversation with a reformed temple prostitute named Lydia provides unexpected insight into the sacrifice system's psychological functions. She explains that offering a dove's life helped her clients process guilt about their own moral compromises. The ritual created a sense of balance. They gave something precious to receive divine forgiveness and blessing. The goddess accepted their offerings and absolved their sins, allowing them to return to their regular lives with cleaner consciences. As night falls, you realize you've witnessed something profoundly human, the attempt to quantify divine favor through material offerings. These sacrifices represent humanity's desperate desire to influence forces beyond their control, even when the methods seem contradictory to the deity's supposed nature. The goddess of love accepts blood offerings because her followers need concrete ways to express their devotion and anxiety. The morning air carries competing fragrances that make your head spin as you enter what amounts to the ancient world's most cutthroat perfume competition. City-states across the Mediterranean have sent their finest aromatics experts to prove their incense blends most perfectly honor Aphrodite. But what you're witnessing isn't just religious devotion. It's economic warfare disguised as spiritual competition. You find yourself standing between the Phoenician and Egyptian pavilions, where master perfumers glare at each other with the intensity of rival generals planning battle strategies. The Phoenicians have brought their legendary cedar and frankincense combinations, while the Egyptians counter with exotic myrrh and lotus blends that supposedly drove Cleopatra's lovers to madness. The air between their stalls practically crackles with professional jealousy and commercial ambition. A Phoenician perfumer named Hiram explains his family's secret formula as he crushes rose petals with practiced precision. His blend includes frankincense from Somalia, cedar oil from Lebanon, and crushed pearls from the Red Sea. Ingredients that cost more than most people's annual income. But he insists the expense is justified because Aphrodite deserves only the finest offerings, and his family's reputation depends on maintaining their position as the goddess's preferred suppliers. The Egyptian delegation, led by a woman named Nefertiti, apparently a popular name among perfumers, responds with their own display of exotic ingredients. She demonstrates how genuine spikenard from India creates completely different aromatic effects than the cheaper substitutes used by competitors. Her assistants burn samples of various blends while she explains the theological significance of each component: myrrh for eternal love, lotus for rebirth, and cinnamon for passion that transcends death. What strikes you most about this competition is how it reflects broader geopolitical tensions. The Phoenicians control most Mediterranean trade routes, while the Egyptians dominate access to African and Asian luxury goods. Their perfume rivalry mirrors their commercial competition, with each group trying to establish exclusive relationships with major temples that could influence trade patterns for generations. The afternoon brings demonstrations that would make modern marketing executives weep with envy. Each delegation stages elaborate presentations designed to prove their incense most effectively summons Aphrodite's presence. The Phoenicians create a ceremony involving synchronized dancers who move through clouds of their signature blend, while the Egyptians respond with a ritual that supposedly recreates the aromatic environment of the goddess's birth from sea foam. You observe temple priests carefully evaluating each presentation, but their criteria extend far beyond simple fragrance quality. They're considering factors like ingredient availability, price stability, and the political implications of choosing one supplier over another. A decision to favor Egyptian incense might strengthen diplomatic ties with Alexandria, while supporting Phoenician perfumers could improve trade relationships with Tyre and Sidon. The competition reveals fascinating details about ancient perfume technology. You watch as craftsmen demonstrate techniques for extracting essential oils, preserving delicate fragrances, and creating complex blends that maintain their potency for months. These aren't primitive processes. They represent sophisticated chemistry that produces results comparable to modern perfumery. The goddess of beauty, it seems, has inspired genuine scientific innovation. A heated argument erupts between the Syrian and Arabian delegations over the proper use of oud, a rare wood that produces incredibly expensive aromatic oil. The Syrians claim their mountain-grown oud creates more spiritual fragrances, while the Arabians insist their desert varieties better capture the goddess's passionate nature. The debate becomes so intense that temple guards intervene, but not before you learn that control of oud sources represents a major economic prize worth fighting over. The evening's formal judging ceremony reveals the political complexity underlying this seemingly religious competition. The head priest announces that the temple will purchase incense from multiple suppliers rather than choosing a single winner, a diplomatic solution that avoids offending any major trading partner. However, the quantities ordered clearly favor certain groups, sending subtle signals about the temple's political preferences and commercial relationships. You witness the economic impact of these decisions as merchants immediately begin adjusting their trade plans based on the temple's announcements. A large order for Phoenician cedar oil will affect shipping schedules throughout the eastern Mediterranean, while increased demand for Egyptian myrrh will influence caravan routes across North Africa. The goddess of love has become an economic force that shapes international commerce. The most surprising revelation comes as you learn about the temple's quality control systems. Priests maintain detailed records of each supplier's products, tracking factors like consistency, purity, and spiritual effectiveness. They've developed standardized testing procedures that would impress modern quality assurance managers, ensuring that worshippers receive genuine value for their expensive offerings. A conversation with a retired temple administrator named Apollodorus provides historical perspective on how these competitions evolved. He explains that early temples simply burned whatever local materials were available, but growing wealth and international connections created demand for more exotic offerings. The goddess's followers began competing to provide the most impressive gifts, gradually transforming religious devotion into commercial opportunity. The festival's final ceremony demonstrates how this perfume competition serves multiple purposes simultaneously. The winning blends are burned in massive quantities, creating aromatic clouds that can be smelled throughout the city. This spectacular display honors the goddess while advertising the temple's wealth and the supplier's quality. Religious devotion, commercial promotion, and civic pride combine in a single magnificent event. As the evening winds down, you realize you've witnessed something remarkable, a religious festival that functions as an international trade fair, where spiritual devotion and commercial ambition interweave so completely that separating them becomes impossible. The goddess of love midnight approaches as you slip through shadowed temple corridors towards ceremonies that officially don't exist, but which everyone knows represent the festival's true heart. What you're about to witness will show you how ancient families used religious cover to arrange marriages that could reshape entire social hierarchies, proving that love and politics have always danced together in the darkness. You follow a group of veiled women through a hidden entrance that leads to the temple's underground chambers, spaces that never appear on official maps, but which serve as the ancient world's most exclusive matchmaking venue. The air grows thick with incense and anticipation as you realize you're entering a space where Rome's most powerful families conduct business that could affect the empire's future. The chamber's layout immediately reveals its dual purpose. Religious altars line the walls, their surfaces covered with offerings to Aphrodite, but the room's center contains what looks suspiciously like a conference table, surrounded by chairs arranged for serious negotiations. Oil lamps cast dancing shadows that provide perfect cover for discreet conversations, while the constant sound of prayers and chanting masks any discussions that might prove politically sensitive. You recognize several faces from the morning's public ceremonies, but their behavior here differs dramatically from their daytime personas. Senator Marcus Crassus, who spent the afternoon delivering speeches about traditional Roman values, now quietly negotiates his daughter's marriage to a Gallic chieftain's son, an alliance that could secure peace on the northern frontier while opening new trade opportunities. The goddess of love, it seems, presides over diplomacy as much as romance. A particularly fascinating negotiation unfolds as you observe the arrangement of a marriage between two families whose public enmity has lasted for generations. Their children's union will end a feud that has disrupted Senate proceedings for decades. But the negotiations require delicate handling to ensure both sides can claim victory. The religious setting provides neutral ground where ancient enemies can meet without losing face, while Aphrodite's blessing legitimizes their reconciliation. The midnight hour brings the evening's most sensitive discussions as families address marriages that cross traditional social boundaries. You witness arrangements between patrician and plebeian families, unions between Romans and foreigners, and even negotiations involving freed slaves whose wealth has elevated their status beyond their birth. These marriages would cause scandals if announced publicly, but the goddess's blessing transforms potential controversies into divine will. What strikes you most profoundly is how these secret ceremonies democratize power in unexpected ways. A wealthy merchant's daughter can marry into the senatorial class if her family offers sufficient political support, while a patrician son might wed a foreign princess to secure military alliances. The goddess of love becomes a patron of social mobility, allowing merit and wealth to triumph over birth and tradition. The chamber's religious elements aren't merely decorative. They provide genuine spiritual framework for these worldly negotiations. Families truly believe Aphrodite influences romantic destiny, so they seek her guidance before making decisions that will affect generations. The priests who facilitate these meetings serve as both religious advisors and diplomatic mediators, ensuring that divine will and human ambition align properly. You observe how the secret nature of these ceremonies creates bonds of mutual trust and obligation among participants. Families who have negotiated marriages together feel connected by shared secrets, while the priests who oversee these meetings develop networks of influence that extend throughout the empire. The goddess of love presides over a shadow government that operates parallel to official political institutions. A particularly complex arrangement involves three families whose children's marriages will create a political alliance capable of influencing imperial succession. The negotiations require careful coordination to ensure that each family receives appropriate benefits while maintaining the appearance of romantic choice. The young people involved have been carefully prepared for their roles, understanding that their personal happiness serves larger political purposes. The evening's most poignant moment comes as you witness a mother arranging her son's marriage to secure his political future. She's recently widowed, and this alliance represents her family's only hope of maintaining their social position. The negotiations are conducted with religious solemnity, but her tears reveal the emotional cost of sacrificing personal preferences for political necessity. The goddess of love accepts offerings of both joy and sorrow. The ceremony's climax arrives as the newly arranged couples receive Aphrodite's blessing through rituals that remain hidden from public view. These aren't the elaborate public ceremonies that will follow. They're intimate acknowledgments of divine approval for unions that serve both personal and political purposes. The goddess blesses marriages that will strengthen the empire while potentially creating genuine happiness for the participants. A conversation with an elderly priest named Lucius provides insight into how these secret ceremonies evolved. He explains that public marriage negotiations often became political spectacles that complicated rather than facilitated successful unions. The midnight ceremonies allow families to conduct serious business without public scrutiny, while the religious framework ensures that agreements receive divine sanction. The festival's secret ceremonies reveal how religious institutions can serve as neutral ground for political negotiations that might otherwise prove impossible. The goddess of love provides cover for activities that strengthen the empire while respecting the spiritual needs of her followers. These midnight meetings prove the morning sun illuminates what can only be described as the ancient world's most glamorous fashion show. As the hetairai, educated courtesans who occupy a unique position between respectable women and common prostitutes, transform Aphrodite's festival into a dazzling display of style, wealth, and social ambition that would make modern influencers weep with envy. You find yourself positioned along the temple's marble promenade as these remarkable women make their grand entrance, each one a walking advertisement for the sophisticated luxury that money and education can provide. Unlike the veiled matrons or simply dressed common women, the hetairai appear in public with faces uncovered and clothing that pushes every boundary of acceptable display without quite crossing into scandal. The first to catch your attention is Aspasia of Miletus, whose reputation for intelligence matches her fame for beauty. She glides past wearing a chiton of silk so fine it seems woven from captured moonlight, dyed with Tyrian purple that costs more than most families earn in a year. Her jewelry tells a story of international connections. Egyptian gold, Indian pearls, and Germanic amber arranged in patterns that demonstrate both wealth and sophisticated taste. But what truly sets her apart is her confident bearing. She moves through the crowd like someone accustomed to being the most interesting person in any room. The fashion competition among these women operates on multiple levels simultaneously. Their clothing serves as advertising for their services, demonstration of their clients' generosity, and expression of their personal artistic sensibilities. You watch as Lies of Corinth adjusts her Hammadian to reveal just enough shoulder to be alluring without being vulgar, while Phryne of Thespia experiments with a new hairstyle that incorporates live flowers and tiny golden bells that chime softly as she moves. What fascinates you most is how these women use fashion to communicate complex social messages. A hetera wearing simple but elegant clothing signals that she values refinement over ostentation, while another draped in elaborate jewelry announces her success and availability to wealthy clients. The goddess of beauty presides over a visual language that allows these women to advertise their services while maintaining their dignity. The afternoon brings a more formal presentation as the hetairai participate in the festival's beauty contest. But this isn't the superficial competition you might expect. The judges, senior priestesses and respected citizens, evaluate not just physical appearance but also intelligence, artistic talent, and social grace. You watch as contestants demonstrate their abilities in music, poetry, and conversation, proving that beauty alone isn't sufficient for success in their profession. A particularly memorable moment occurs when Neaira of Athens delivers an impromptu speech about the nature of love that leaves the audience speechless. Her words combine philosophical depth with poetic beauty, demonstrating the kind of intellectual sophistication that allows hetairai to serve as companions to the most powerful men in the ancient world. These women aren't just beautiful, they're educated, articulate, and culturally sophisticated in ways that many respectable wives cannot match. The economic implications of this fashion display become apparent as you observe the crowd's reactions. Wealthy men take mental notes about which women attract the most attention, while their wives study the hetairais' clothing and jewelry for inspiration. A successful courtesan's fashion choices can influence trends throughout the city, making her a cultural tastemaker whose opinions carry weight far beyond her immediate profession. You notice how the hetairais' presence at religious festivals creates interesting social dynamics. Technically, they're participating in sacred ceremonies honoring Aphrodite, which gives them legitimate reasons to appear in public and interact with respectable citizens. The goddess of love provides cover for social mixing that would be impossible in other contexts, allowing these women to maintain relationships that serve both personal and professional purposes. The festival's evening banquet reveals another dimension of hetairai culture, as these women host their own parallel celebration. Their gathering combines religious observance with sophisticated entertainment, featuring performances by renowned musicians, poets, and dancers. You realize you're witnessing an alternative social world where intelligence and artistic talent matter more than birth or conventional respectability. A conversation with Rhodopes, an aging hetera who's transitioned from active practice to managing younger women, provides insight into how this profession operates. She explains that successful courtesans must master skills ranging from conversation and music to business management and international relations. Many of her former colleagues have become wealthy property owners, art patrons, and even political advisors. The goddess of love, it seems, rewards those who serve her with both beauty and brains. The most surprising aspect of the hetairais' festival participation is how it challenges conventional assumptions about women's roles in ancient society. These women speak publicly, own property, travel independently, and influence political decisions, freedoms that married women of similar social backgrounds cannot enjoy. Their profession, while socially marginal, provides opportunities for independence and influence that traditional marriage rarely offers. The festival's fashion show demonstrates how the hetairai use style as a form of personal branding that extends far beyond simple attraction. Their clothing choices communicate their personalities, advertise their specialties, and signal their availability to appropriate clients. A hetera known for intellectual conversation might dress more conservatively to emphasize her sophistication, while another famous for artistic talents might wear more dramatic clothing to showcase her creative sensibilities. As the day concludes, you realize you've witnessed something remarkable. A group of women who have transformed social marginality into cultural influence, using beauty, intelligence, and style to create their own space within ancient society. The goddess of love presides over their success, proving that unconventional paths can sometimes lead to extraordinary destinations. The temple walls whisper with the desperate hopes of countless lovers as you discover what amounts to the ancient world's most elaborate social media platform, carved directly into marble and stone. What you're about to read will reveal how people have always used public spaces to broadcast their romantic desires, creating a permanent record of human longing that makes modern dating apps seem almost quaint by comparison. You run your fingers across inscriptions that cover every available surface around Aphrodite's temple, from elaborate poems commissioned by wealthy suitors to crude declarations scratched by lovesick teenagers. The marble bears witness to thousands of romantic stories, each one a desperate attempt to capture divine attention and influence the course of human hearts. These aren't just graffiti, they're prayers, advertisements, and public declarations that transform the temple into a massive stone-carved dating service. The morning light reveals the sophisticated hierarchy of these inscriptions. Near the temple's main entrance, you find elaborate dedications carved by professional stoneworkers and paid for by wealthy families. These formal declarations announce engagements, celebrate successful marriages, and request divine blessing for important unions. The quality of the carving and the prominence of the location signal the family's social status and financial resources, turning religious devotion into public relations. A particularly impressive inscription catches your attention, a poem dedicated by Marcus Aurelius to his beloved Julia, carved in letters filled with gold and surrounded by intricate rose motifs. The verse combines classical literary references with personal details that suggest genuine affection, but its prominent placement also serves as a public announcement of their engagement and a demonstration of Marcus's wealth and education. The goddess of love presides over romance that doubles as social advertising. As you move away from the main entrance, the inscriptions become more personal and desperate. Here you find the raw emotional appeals of people who can't afford professional carving, but whose need to communicate with the goddess drives them to scratch their pleas into any available surface. A young woman named Lydia has carved her name alongside that of a man called Demetrius, surrounding their names with crude hearts and asking Aphrodite to make him notice me. The simplicity of her request contrasts sharply with the elaborate formal dedications, but her emotional intensity seems equally powerful. The afternoon brings a fascinating discovery, as you realize these inscriptions serve multiple communication purposes simultaneously. Lovers use them to send messages to each other when direct contact is impossible. Families announce their children's availability for marriage, and even married couples request divine intervention for relationship problems. You find a particularly poignant example where a husband has carved an apology to his wife, asking both her and the goddess for forgiveness after some unspecified transgression. What strikes you most profoundly is how these stone messages create a permanent record of human emotional evolution. You can trace the same person's romantic journey across multiple inscriptions, from hopeful courtship through marriage negotiations to either celebration or heartbreak. A young man named Gaius appears in several carvings, first requesting help winning his beloved's attention, then thanking the goddess for their successful union, and finally, years later, asking for divine assistance in healing their troubled marriage. The temple's priests have developed an entire industry around these inscriptions, offering services ranging from professional carving to strategic placement advice. You watch as a priest named Apollodorus consults with a nervous young suitor about the best location for his declaration. The priest explains that inscriptions near the goddess's statue receive more divine attention, while those visible from the main road attract more human readers. The cost varies accordingly, creating a market where romantic expression becomes a luxury commodity. A heated argument erupts between two families whose children's inscriptions have been placed too close together, creating the appearance of a romantic connection that doesn't actually exist. The temple administrators must intervene, explaining the complex etiquette that governs inscription placement and the potential social consequences of misunderstandings. The goddess of love presides over a communication system so sophisticated that it requires professional management. The evening brings a different perspective as you observe people reading the inscriptions by lamplight, treating the temple walls like an ancient version of social media feeds. Young women study successful marriage announcements for inspiration, while their mothers evaluate potential suitors based on the quality and content of their carved declarations. The inscriptions serve as a public database of romantic information that helps families make informed decisions about their children's futures. You discover that some inscriptions function as ancient personal advertisements, with unmarried individuals describing their qualities and preferences in hopes of attracting suitable partners. A young merchant named Lucius has carved an elaborate self-description that includes his business success, family connections, and desire for an educated wife who shares his interest in philosophy. His inscription reads like a modern dating profile, complete with specific requirements and contact information. The most surprising discovery comes as you learn about the temple's inscription maintenance system. Priests regularly clean and restore important dedications, while allowing others to weather away naturally. This selective preservation creates a curated record of romantic history that emphasizes successful unions while gradually erasing evidence of failed relationships. The goddess of love, it seems, prefers to remember happy endings. A conversation with an elderly stone carver named Demetrius provides insight into how these inscriptions reflect changing social attitudes. He's been working at the temple for 40 years and has observed how romantic expressions have evolved from formal family announcements to increasingly personal emotional appeals. The goddess's followers have become more willing to express individual desires rather than simply accepting arranged marriages. The temple's inscription collection reveals something profound about human nature: the universal need to make private emotions public, to seek divine intervention in matters of the heart, and to leave permanent records of temporary feelings. These stone messages prove that people have always used available technology to broadcast their romantic hopes, whether through carved marble or digital profiles. The morning sun illuminates ledgers that would make modern accountants weep with envy as you discover the staggering economic empire built around humanity's eternal quest for love. What you're about to witness will reveal how Aphrodite's festivals generated wealth that rivaled entire kingdoms, proving that the business of romance has always been one of history's most profitable enterprises. You find yourself in the temple's administrative complex, surrounded by scribes who maintain financial records with the precision of modern banking institutions. The numbers they're calculating represent the economic impact of love-based tourism, religious offerings, and commercial activities that transform spiritual devotion into massive wealth generation. A senior administrator named Apollodorus explains that the temple's annual revenue exceeds the gross domestic product of several smaller city-states, making Aphrodite one of the ancient world's most successful economic entities. The festival's direct economic impact becomes apparent as you examine visitor registration records. During major celebrations, the temple hosts over 50,000 pilgrims from across the Mediterranean, each one spending money on transportation, accommodation, food, and religious services. A typical visitor's expenses include ship passage, local lodging, temple donations, sacrifice animals, votive offerings, and souvenirs. Expenditures that support hundreds of local businesses and create employment for thousands of workers. The morning's first revelation comes as you study the temple's pricing structure for various services. A simple dove sacrifice costs 3 silver coins, while elaborate ceremonies involving multiple animals and professional priests can cost more than a skilled craftsman's annual income. The temple offers payment plans for expensive services, allowing families to spread costs over several months while ensuring that divine favor remains accessible to all social classes. The goddess of love, it turns out, accepts both cash and credit. A particularly fascinating aspect of the temple's economy involves the international trade networks that supply festival materials. You examine shipping manifests that detail imports from across the known world. Frankincense from Arabia, silk from China, pearls from India, and amber from the Baltic regions. The temple's purchasing power influences trade routes and commodity prices throughout the Mediterranean, making Aphrodite a major player in international commerce. The afternoon brings insight into the temple's investment strategies, as you observe priests managing a portfolio that would impress modern financial advisors. Temple funds are invested in shipping ventures, real estate development, agricultural projects, and even early forms of banking that provide loans to local businesses. The goddess's wealth generates more wealth through sophisticated financial instruments that ensure the temple's long-term prosperity. What strikes you most profoundly is how the temple functions as an ancient economic development agency for the surrounding region. Festival activities support industries ranging from hospitality and transportation to crafts and entertainment. Local farmers benefit from increased demand for sacrificial animals, while artisans profit from orders for votive offerings and ceremonial objects. The goddess of love presides over an economic ecosystem that creates prosperity for entire communities. The temple's employment records reveal the scale of its workforce during festival periods. Permanent staff includes priests, administrators, guards, and maintenance workers, but major celebrations require hundreds of temporary employees. Musicians, dancers, cooks, servers, cleaners, and security personnel. The hiring process resembles modern event management, with specialized contractors providing services ranging from floral arrangements to crowd control. You discover that the temple operates its own banking services, accepting deposits from wealthy pilgrims and providing loans for various purposes. Interest rates vary based on the borrower's social status and the loan's purpose. Financing a daughter's wedding receives more favorable terms than funding a commercial venture. The goddess of love extends her blessing to financial transactions that serve romantic purposes while generating additional revenue for the temple. The evening's financial review reveals how the temple's wealth creates political influence that extends far beyond religious matters. Major donations come with expectations of political support, while the temple's investment decisions can affect local economic conditions. You observe negotiations where temple administrators use their financial leverage to influence municipal policies about taxation, trade regulations, and public works projects. A conversation with a retired temple treasurer named Marcus provides historical perspective on how the institution's wealth evolved. He explains that early temples relied primarily on simple donations, but growing prosperity and international connections created opportunities for more sophisticated revenue generation. The goddess's followers gradually transformed religious devotion into economic opportunity, creating a model that other temples throughout the empire have attempted to replicate. The most surprising discovery involves the temple's charitable activities, which represent a significant portion of its annual budget. Funds support orphanages, provide dowries for poor girls, offer medical care for indigent pilgrims, and maintain public works projects that benefit the entire community. The goddess of love uses her wealth to address social problems while maintaining her reputation for benevolence and compassion. The temple's economic records demonstrate how religious festivals can function as engines of regional development, creating wealth that extends far beyond the immediate religious community. The goddess of love presides over an economic miracle that proves spiritual devotion and material prosperity need not be mutually exclusive. You examine detailed cost-benefit analyses that temple administrators use to evaluate different festival activities. These calculations consider factors like attendance projections, revenue potential, operational costs, and long-term reputation effects. The decision-making process resembles modern corporate planning, with religious considerations balanced against financial realities. The festival's economic success has created a model that other religious institutions attempt to copy, but few achieve comparable results. The combination of genuine spiritual appeal, sophisticated marketing, and professional management creates a unique competitive advantage that generates sustainable prosperity while serving legitimate religious needs. As the day concludes, you realize you've witnessed something remarkable, a religious institution that has successfully monetized human emotions while maintaining its spiritual integrity. The goddess of love presides over an economic empire built on humanity's eternal desire for romantic fulfillment, proving that the business of the heart will always be profitable. The sound of hammers striking chisels echoes through the morning air as you witness Christianity's systematic campaign to erase Aphrodite's festivals. But what you're about to observe will reveal how deeply rooted traditions resist even the most determined efforts at religious transformation. The goddess of love refuses to die quietly, and her followers have developed remarkably creative strategies for preserving their cherished celebrations under new theological management. You find yourself standing beside Bishop Chrysostom as he directs workers to deface the temple's elaborate frescoes depicting scenes of divine lovemaking. His face shows the grim determination of someone who understands that destroying physical symbols represents only the first step in a much larger cultural battle. The workers chip away at marble carvings with obvious reluctance. Many of them participated in these festivals as children and struggle to destroy what they once considered sacred. The morning's first confrontation occurs when a group of elderly women attempts to prevent the removal of Aphrodite's statue from the temple's central shrine. These aren't wild pagans or dangerous revolutionaries. They're respectable grandmothers whose families have honored the goddess for generations. Their leader, a dignified matron named Helena, argues that the statue represents artistic heritage rather than religious worship, but the bishop remains unmoved. The goddess of love becomes a casualty in Christianity's war against competing spiritual traditions. What fascinates you most is how quickly the festival's participants adapt to new circumstances. Within hours of the temple's official closure, you observe informal gatherings in private homes where families continue celebrating Aphrodite's feast days under different names. A wedding celebration incorporates traditional rose petal ceremonies while claiming they honor Saint Valentine, a recently martyred Christian whose story conveniently involves romantic love. The goddess survives by wearing new theological clothing. The afternoon brings a more sophisticated form of resistance as you witness the emergence of hybrid religious practices that blend Christian and pagan elements. A priest named Father Marcus conducts a marriage ceremony that includes prayers to Jesus alongside rituals that clearly derive from Aphrodite worship. When questioned about these practices, he explains that God works through all forms of love, making it appropriate to incorporate beautiful traditions from the past. The goddess of love finds refuge in theological flexibility. A particularly clever adaptation occurs at a Christian festival honoring the Virgin Mary, where organizers have recreated many elements of Aphrodite's celebrations while claiming they celebrate divine motherhood rather than romantic love. The decorations, music, and even some of the rituals remain virtually identical to the pagan originals, but the theological interpretation has been carefully adjusted to satisfy Christian authorities. The goddess of love masquerades as the mother of God. The evening reveals how economic pressures complicate the Christian campaign against pagan festivals. Local merchants who depend on festival tourism lobby church officials to permit modified celebrations that maintain commercial benefits while satisfying religious requirements. A compromise emerges where cultural festivals can continue as long as they avoid explicit pagan worship and include appropriate Christian elements. The goddess of love survives through economic necessity. You observe a fascinating theological debate between progressive and conservative Christian leaders about how to handle popular pagan traditions. The progressives argue that God can work through existing cultural forms, making it possible to Christianize rather than eliminate beloved festivals. The conservatives insist that any compromise with paganism represents dangerous theological corruption. Historians still argue whether these debates reflected genuine religious conviction or practical political calculation. The most surprising development comes as you discover that some Christian communities have begun creating new festivals that serve the same social functions as the old pagan celebrations. A festival of Christian love incorporates matchmaking activities, community feasting, and even discreet romantic rituals while maintaining theological orthodoxy. The goddess of love inspires imitation even among her supposed enemies. A conversation with a former temple priestess named Lydia, who has converted to Christianity but continues practicing modified versions of her old rituals, provides insight into how religious transitions actually occur. She explains that spiritual beliefs can change more easily than emotional needs, making it natural to preserve practices that serve important social functions. The goddess of love transcends theological boundaries because human nature remains constant. The Christian campaign's limited success becomes apparent as you observe how many supposedly eliminated practices continue in modified forms. Wedding ceremonies still include rose petals and dove releases. Young women still gather to discuss romantic prospects during religious festivals, and families still seek divine blessing for their children's marriages. The goddess of love survives by adapting to new circumstances rather than confronting them directly. The evening's most poignant moment occurs as you witness an elderly priest conducting what he claims is a Christian blessing ceremony, but which clearly incorporates elements from Aphrodite worship. His actions suggest that even religious officials struggle to completely abandon tradition that have provided meaning and community for generations. The goddess of love finds allies among her supposed replacements. You discover that rural communities prove particularly resistant to religious change, maintaining traditional festivals while claiming they honor Christian saints rather than pagan deities. The practical difficulties of monitoring remote areas allow these communities to preserve their cultural heritage while avoiding direct confrontation with church authorities. The goddess of love finds refuge in geographical isolation. The most remarkable aspect of this religious transition is how it demonstrates the persistence of human needs that transcend specific theological systems. People require community celebrations, romantic guidance, and divine blessing for their relationships, regardless of which god officially provides these services. The goddess of love represents eternal human desires that survive even determined efforts at religious transformation. As night falls, you realize you've witnessed something profound about how cultural change actually occurs. Religious authorities can destroy buildings and ban ceremonies, but they cannot eliminate the human needs that created these traditions. The volcanic ash that preserved Pompeii has given you an unprecedented window into how ordinary Romans actually celebrated love festivals in their daily lives. And what you're discovering challenges every assumption scholars have made about the gap between official religious practices and popular culture. The evidence buried beneath Mount Vesuvius reveals that Aphrodite's influence permeated Roman domestic life in ways that make modern Valentine's Day celebrations seem almost restrained by comparison. You find yourself standing in the atrium of a middle-class Roman home, where archaeologists have uncovered what amounts to a private shrine dedicated to Venus, the Roman version of Aphrodite. The household altar displays bronze figurines, offering bowls, and wall paintings that clearly indicate this family celebrated the goddess's festivals with enthusiasm that matched any public temple. The volcanic ash has preserved rose petals, wine stains, and even fragments of love letters that provide intimate glimpses into how real people honored the goddess of love. The morning's first discovery occurs in the home's kitchen, where you examine preserved remains of a feast that was clearly being prepared for Venus's festival when the volcano erupted. The menu includes honey cakes shaped like hearts, wine mixed with rose water, and elaborate pastries decorated with symbols of love and fertility. Recipe notes scratched into wax tablets reveal that this family took their religious cooking seriously, following traditional formulas passed down through generations of Venus worshippers. A particularly fascinating find emerges from the home's master bedroom, where wall frescoes depict scenes that blend mythological imagery with what appear to be portraits of the family members themselves. The husband and wife are shown receiving Venus's blessing for their marriage, while their teenage daughter appears in a scene requesting divine assistance with her romantic prospects. These aren't just decorative elements, they're personal religious statements that transform private space into sacred territory. The afternoon brings revelations from the home's garden, where archaeologists have identified the remains of plants specifically associated with Venus worship. Rose bushes, myrtle trees, and herb gardens containing aphrodisiac plants suggest that this family maintained their own private temple complex dedicated to the goddess. The garden's layout follows patterns described in religious texts, proving that ordinary citizens took their devotional responsibilities seriously enough to recreate temple environments in their homes. What strikes you most profoundly is how seamlessly religious and domestic activities interweave in this household. You examine a child's toy collection that includes miniature Venus statues alongside more conventional playthings, suggesting that worship of the love goddess began in early childhood and continued throughout life. Educational materials found in the home study include texts about proper festival observances, indicating that parents took responsibility for teaching their children appropriate religious practices. The house's most surprising feature is a hidden room that appears to have served as a private meeting space for neighborhood women celebrating Venus festivals. The chamber contains seating for about 20 people, along with storage areas for ceremonial objects and religious supplies. Graffiti on the walls includes names and dates that suggest regular gatherings occurred here, creating a domestic version of the community celebrations that took place in public temples. You discover evidence that this family participated in elaborate gift exchanges during Venus festivals, with household inventories listing items specifically designated as religious presents. These include jewelry, perfumes, decorative objects, and even commissioned artwork that was given to friends and family members as expressions of divine favor. The goddess of love presides over a domestic economy that parallels the commercial activities surrounding public temples. The evening's exploration reveals how Venus worship influenced the family's daily routine throughout the year, not just during major festivals. You find evidence of weekly offerings, monthly ceremonies, and seasonal celebrations that kept the goddess constantly present in household activities. Prayer schedules written on papyrus fragments show that family members took turns maintaining the domestic shrine, ensuring that Venus received continuous attention and devotion. A particularly poignant discovery occurs in the teenage daughter's bedroom, where personal items reveal her deep involvement in Venus worship. Her jewelry box contains amulets requesting divine assistance with romantic matters, while her diary includes detailed accounts of dreams she believes were sent by the goddess. These intimate records provide unprecedented insight into how young Romans experienced religious devotion as a personal relationship rather than mere social obligation. The home's library contains an impressive collection of texts related to Venus worship, including official religious manuals, popular devotional literature, and even what appear to be family-written prayers and hymns. This suggests that ordinary citizens didn't just passively participate in religious activities. They actively studied their faith and contributed to its intellectual development. The goddess of love inspired scholarly devotion alongside emotional worship. The most remarkable aspect of this domestic religious complex is how it demonstrates the complete integration of sacred and secular life in Roman culture. Venus worship wasn't something that happened only in temples or during special occasions. It was woven into every aspect of daily existence, from cooking and gardening to child-rearing and social relationships. The goddess of love presided over a comprehensive lifestyle that encompassed all human activities. Archaeological evidence from neighboring houses reveals that this family's devotional practices weren't unusual. Similar domestic shrines, festival preparations, and religious artifacts appear throughout Pompeii's residential districts. The goddess of love commanded widespread popular devotion that extended far beyond official religious institutions, creating a grassroots spiritual movement that shaped Roman domestic culture. The preservation of this household provides unprecedented evidence that challenges scholarly assumptions about the relationship between public and private religious practices in ancient Rome. Rather than representing watered-down versions of temple worship, these domestic celebrations appear to have been equally sophisticated and meaningful to their participants. As you conclude your exploration, you realize you've witnessed something extraordinary, a complete domestic religious ecosystem that demonstrates how deeply spiritual beliefs. The morning light streams through your window as you sit in a modern cafe, surrounded by couples exchanging Valentine's gifts, and suddenly the connections become crystal clear. The ancient threads of Aphrodite's festivals weave directly through contemporary romantic traditions in ways that would astonish both ancient worshippers and modern lovers. What you're about to discover will forever change how you view everything from Valentine's Day cards to wedding ceremonies, revealing that humanity's approaches to celebrating love have remained remarkably consistent across millennia. You observe a young man presenting his girlfriend with a bouquet of red roses, and the gesture immediately transports you back to those ancient temple courtyards where devotees offered identical flowers to Aphrodite's statue. The symbolism hasn't changed. Roses still represent passionate love, divine blessing, and romantic devotion, just as they did when Greek priestesses scattered petals across marble altars. The goddess of love continues to receive her traditional offerings, even when the givers don't realize they're participating in religious rituals that predate Christianity by centuries. The afternoon brings a revelation as you watch couples exchanging heart-shaped chocolates and realize you're witnessing a direct descendant of the honey cakes that ancient festival goers shared during Aphrodite's celebrations. The shapes have evolved from doves and roses to hearts, but the underlying concept remains identical: sweet offerings that symbolize the sweetness of love and the hope for divine favor in romantic relationships. Modern candy manufacturers have unknowingly preserved religious traditions that once required elaborate temple ceremonies. A wedding reception in the hotel ballroom provides even more striking parallels as you observe rituals that would be instantly recognizable to ancient festival participants. The bride throws her bouquet just as Roman women once cast flowers toward Venus's statue, hoping to transfer divine blessing to unmarried friends. The couple feeds each other cake in a gesture that directly echoes the shared honey offerings that ancient lovers presented to Aphrodite. Even the tradition of carrying the bride across the threshold derives from Roman customs designed to ensure Venus's protection for new marriages. What fascinates you most is how modern Valentine's Day celebrations recreate the essential structure of ancient love festivals without any conscious awareness of their religious origins. February 14th serves the same social functions as Aphrodite's feast days. It provides a designated time for romantic expression, encourages gift-giving that strengthens relationships, and creates community celebrations that reinforce cultural values about love and partnership. The goddess of love continues to shape human behavior through traditions that have survived the collapse of the civilization that created them. The evening's exploration of modern dating culture reveals even deeper connections to ancient practices. Online dating profiles function exactly like the inscriptions that lovesick Romans carved into temple walls, public declarations designed to attract divine and human attention to romantic desires. The language has evolved from Latin prayers to English descriptions, but the underlying purpose remains identical: broadcasting personal information in hopes of finding love through supernatural intervention and community support. You discover that modern relationship counseling incorporates techniques that ancient temple priestesses would recognize immediately. Contemporary therapists encourage couples to create shared rituals, exchange meaningful gifts, and seek guidance from higher powers, approaches that directly parallel the services that Aphrodite's temples provided to struggling relationships. The goddess of love continues to heal broken hearts through professional intermediaries who may not realize they're practicing ancient religious traditions. The most surprising connection emerges as you examine modern wedding traditions and realize that virtually every element derives from ancient religious practices designed to honor loved deities. White wedding dresses echo the pure robes worn by temple priestesses. Wedding rings symbolize the eternal bonds that Aphrodite blessed, and honeymoons recreate the sacred journeys that ancient couples undertook to receive divine blessing for their unions. The goddess of love presides over contemporary marriages through traditions that have survived theological revolutions and cultural transformations. A conversation with a folklore professor named Dr. Sarah Mitchell provides scholarly perspective on how these ancient traditions survived Christianity's attempts to eliminate pagan practices. She explains that human emotional needs transcend specific religious systems, making it natural for love-related customs to persist even when their original theological context disappears. The goddess of love represents eternal aspects of human nature that no amount of religious reform can eliminate. The modern perfume industry provides another fascinating example of ancient continuity, as contemporary fragrance marketing uses imagery and language that directly echoes Aphrodite worship. Advertisements promise that specific scents will make wearers irresistible to potential partners, just as ancient vendors claimed their aromatic oils carried divine blessing. The goddess of love continues to influence consumer behavior through commercial appeals that preserve religious concepts in secular packaging. You observe how modern romantic comedies follow narrative patterns that ancient festival goers would recognize immediately. Lovers face obstacles that test their devotion, seek guidance from wise advisors, and ultimately receive happy endings that suggest divine approval of their unions. The goddess of love continues to shape storytelling traditions that reinforce cultural beliefs about romance, destiny, and the power of true love to overcome all obstacles. The evening's final revelation comes as you realize that modern society's emphasis on romantic love as the basis for marriage represents a direct inheritance from ancient religious traditions that viewed passionate affection as sacred rather than merely practical. Contemporary culture's belief that love should be the primary factor in choosing life partners derives from theological concepts that made Aphrodite one of the most powerful deities in the ancient world. As night falls, you understand that you've discovered something profound about cultural continuity and human nature. The goddess of love never really disappeared. She simply adapted to new circumstances, preserving her influence through traditions that serve the same emotional and social functions they've always served. Modern romantic culture represents an unbroken chain of practices that connect contemporary lovers to ancient worshippers who sought the same divine blessing for their relationships. The ancient festivals of Aphrodite continue in every Valentine's Day celebration, every wedding ceremony, and every romantic gesture that seeks to transform ordinary affection into something sacred and eternal. The goddess of love remains as powerful today as she was in ancient temples, proving that some aspects of human experience transcend historical change and theological revolution. And so, as the final echoes of ancient temple bells fade into the soft whisper of evening wind, you find yourself back in your own time, your own space, carrying with you the gentle wisdom of ages past. The stories of Aphrodite's festivals drift around you like rose petals on a warm breeze, each memory a small treasure that speaks to something timeless in the human heart. You've walked through marble corridors where love was both sacred and practical, where divine blessing intertwined with human ambition, and where the goddess of beauty presided over the beautiful complexity of mortal relationships. The ancient world feels closer now, doesn't it? Less distant, less foreign, Because love in all its forms, passionate, strategic, desperate, joyful, remains the same force that moved hearts in temple courtyards and moves them still in coffee shops and wedding chapels. Let these stories settle into your dreams like honey dissolving in warm wine. The priestesses and politicians, the courtesans and merchants, the lovesick teenagers carving their hopes into marble, they're all still with us in every Valentine exchanged, every wedding celebrated, every heart that seeks its perfect match. The goddess of love never truly left. She simply learned to speak in new languages while preserving her ancient wisdom. Rest now, knowing that the human capacity for love, in all its messy, magnificent, contradictory glory, connects you to every soul who ever lit incense for Aphrodite, every hand that ever scattered rose petals in hope, every voice that ever whispered a prayer for love's blessing. The festivals continue in every act of devotion, every gesture of affection, every moment when two hearts recognize each other across the vast expanse of time and space. Sweet dreams, dear listener.